Thank you all for filing in. We'll be starting in just a second. Okay, I would like to thank you all for attending. Welcome to the reading for the Poetry Center Book Award. Kiki Petrosino's collection, White Blood, A Lyric of Virginia, was selected for the Poetry Center Book Award by Tongo Eisen-Martin. Thank y'all again for being here to celebrate Kiki and her amazing collection. Tonight, both poets will be reading from their work and will engage in a conversation with one another and the online audience. But before we begin, the Poetry Center and San Francisco State would like to acknowledge that they exist on unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, and that these people still exist on this land. We can take action to support them beyond acknowledgement by looking into the Shumi land tax. The Shumi land tax acts as a reparation which pays these Ramaytush and Ohlone people and allows them to do with our money as they please. So I really encourage you all to seek out this amazing endeavor. And now I would like to introduce the judge for this year's Poetry Center Book Award. Tongo Eisen-Martin is a poet, educator, revolutionary, and trailblazer in the Bay Area community. He's the co-founder of Black Freighter Press. His work includes Somebody's Dead Already by Bootstrap Press, Heaven's All Goodbyes, and Blood on the Fog, the latter two which were published by City Lights Book Pocket Poet Series. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting tongue-tied. And his final book is Waiting Behind Tornadoes for Food. The poetry LP, I Go to the Railroad Tracks and Follow Them to the Station of My Enemies, came out from Rock in Your Hands Records. He was the inaugural Maza writer resident for the Poetry Center at SF State, and he is currently the Poet Laureate in San Francisco. Thank you, Tongo.
I talk facing away from the dead. They replace me with the change in my pocket. A penny that's yet to be invented. They say you have to know how to cut a throat on the way to cutting a throat. After sleeping on a mattress made from 2 garbage bags of clothes, I became content with the small gestures of plantation fires. Playing with couch ashes, I realized how weird the universe was. It exists in so many places, so many random things. It interrupts me while I'm trying to dream. Like your clay correspondence, Lord. To be transparent, I have 20 books next to a bullet, like an old man giving advice at the beginning of a revolution. I've really done it, Lord. Explored the mumbles of my mind. Explored what's naturally there, and I found no brainwashing. I found Africa, Lord. I have a future. It takes place in the diasporic South. I have morning possessions, modern militancy. I mean windows to the South. I'll walk on a missile for food. I guess you will not want flowers for a few years, Lord. Will I be tied face to face with the country I murdered? Merge with us, Lord. Our old metal versus a new metal. Our old metal versus a pool of meandering imperialist faces, a multiculturalism of sorts. The dead replaced me with a comedian's chest cavity instead of a chest cavity held tight. It takes a violent middleman for me to talk to myself. Stories that travel through other people's stories, a song about a song, a hemisphere about a hemisphere, stories that travel through a conquered poet. My mother remembers Africa, Lord. She killed on behalf of you, Lord. I wore a machete all winter and no one asked me what it meant. I read 1,000 books in front of the world. What I do is fight poems and sleep through decking in San Francisco prayer circles. Watch people play for post-working class associative surfaces or recreations of a governor's desk. Ruling class art of utility, playing find a sociopathic bureaucrat. A day some white people scare even easier. TV in the basket next to a ceramic baby, wearing ceramic armor, musket progeny fantasizing through the art of the poor. Their trendy latches locked before God. Black art hunted down like a dog. Hand over my friends, Lord. Lord, I think I'm gonna die in the war. I mean, unelected white people in my small house like a blues song of no spiritual effect, a dollhouse H-bomb, a pony show near dead bodies, apartheid weddings that go right, apartheid white people who give birth to mathematicians, the spiritual continuity of barracks and police stations, a chemical interpretation of a Sunday trip to church, church smells in their pockets, a river mistaken for a talking river, no autobiography outside of small personal victories of violence and drug use, made in the image of God trinkets who white abolitionists confided in their children about. Chemical assurances that they will switch from Black artist to white artist, from Black God to white God, from Black worker to white worker. I think about you cautiously, Lord. In the same way I think about my childhood, Lord. Foxhole Friday nights, most of life is mute. A comedian points out a planter's field to a priest, king, sugarcane king, cotton king, revolutionary, the Bible essential, containing all modes of shallow introduction, introducing an unlisted planet class, speaking about fevers and balance sheets and reassuring the masses that we could figure out our fathers later. A priest took my mother lightly, Lord. Stood in front of parishioners, re-raveling fantasies about Black art. Priest reading confidently before I broke him and broke his parallel. You know, after the day, I've never been a poet before. A little brother watches his big brother's friends. They leave rifles on shelter walls. They agree with me and call it literature. It's a simple matter, this revolution thing. To really lie to no one. To keep nothing God-like. To write a poem for God. You know, all street life, to a certain extent, starts fair. Sometimes with a spiritual memory even. Pre-dawn soul clap, your father dying even. Maybe I pushed the city too far. My sensitivities to landfill districting and minstrel whistles, white supremacist graffiti on westbound, rail guards all over coming reauthored. Reauthored about revolutionary violence that chose its own protagonists of muted stage of genius, the garbage is growing voices. Condensed Marxism, for warrior depressives, underpasses in their pockets because they just might be deities, a decent bit on the panther name of merciful Marxism. Disquieted home life, a metaphor for relaxing next to a person who is relaxing next to a gun. I stare at my father for a few seconds, then return to my upbringing. Return to the souls of Ohio Black folk, revolution damn near pagan at this point. You know what the clown wants? The respect of the ant. Wants to interpret pain only, wants to pull a 38 out of a begging bowl, wants me to hurt my hand on this pen. I'm not tired of these rooms, just tired of the world that give them a relativity. My only change of clothes prosecuted the government finally learned how to write poems, shootouts that briefly align, that make up a parable or parables like white bodies are paid well. Do white men even have leaders? Are all white people white men? A rap pictures a river, can almost taste the racial divide. Can almost roll a family member's head into a city hall legislative chamber. Knows who in this good book will fly. I mean, all I do is practice, Lord. Decided not to talk out of anger ever again. Met my wife at the same time I met new audience members for our pain. We passed each other cigarettes and watched cops win. A city gone uniquely linear, Harlem of the West, do a true universe. I will always remember you in fancy clothes, my wife said. So here I sit, twisting in silk ideation. Rifle made of post-bellum targets made of honest language. The San Francisco poetry is how God knows that it's me whining. Riding among the lesser respected wolves, lesser observed militarization, Dixie list prison bookkeeping, I mean the California Great Coast are coming. Lynch mob gossip and bourgeois debt collection is tempting to change professions mid-poem. In the Chicago briefing, a white sergeant saying blank slate for all of us after this black organizer is dead. Sad academics toasting $2 wine at the tank parade. They have nothing, Lord, just nuclear cobblestones, gun line athleticism, and the last of the inherited asthma. Children giving white dolls to play with in fear. Facial expressions borrowed from rich people's shoestrings. I can hear hate and teach hate and call tools by people names and name people dead to themselves. No one get naturalized except federal agents soon. Carving the equator in the throat soon. Sorry to make you relive all this, Lord, all this pre-dime monarchy friends putting up politician posters and snorting the remainder of the pace. Mental scripts shoved into the walls by their elders. My children sharpen their quarters on the city's edge. For these audiences, I project myself into a ghost-like state. For these gangsters, I do the same. Every now and then, take a nervous look, eat, sleep becomes Christ, sleep starts growing a racial identity. Do you ever spiral, Lord? Has the gang agents betrayed us? Be patient with my poems, Lord. There's so much pain, it's a point to crime. I mean, there has to be a phrase, traders come with it. Lord, is that my revolver in your hand? You know better presence in these of yonder cages have called us holy slaves. Fill the school libraries with cop documentaries, baby. I don't have money for food. Well, I have no present moment at all. I had this dream planned dead in a weekday that I was laid up in the hospital, and people kept coming into my room by the dozens, and each dozen had special handshakes for each other and occasionally current dance moves. And they would kick my hospital bed from time to time to let me know that they would be dancing from this room on out to my grave. Strange cha-chas and soft shoe shuffles, disco spins, like they were dancing for a white sundial, marking numbness in their feet drum race ride. And I was ready to die because, you know, ask a musician in the tombs after court, it's the surroundings themselves that is the uniform. But still, I just couldn't bring myself to visualize against God. One of them stood over me like a conductor, waving their arms over my body, directing my heart to beat fainter and fainter, directing the tubes to turn the fluids back. And I kept fading from consciousness with thud after thud on the legs of my bed as they danced wilder and wilder, wild but meek, or artificially meek, like an artificial pastor told him to be. I was to be some kind of character or projection to be laid at their feet. Are you the only one participating in the revolution today? They mocked me, and I was ready to go because, you know, there are plenty of pianos that could use a new soul, and I think we're going to be in the revolution for as long as it takes. So you can punch me out now. I mean, I was born with one foot in a lime pit anyway, but check it out. No one bothered to ask the doctor if I was really dead. They were just too busy strutting, too busy kissing. I was fading with only enough breath and sweet consciousness to count their smiles. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I heard a voice, a whisper, and it was counting with me. 6, we said. 7, we said. 8, we said. Then another voice joined us. 9, 10, then another. You see, I haven't been eating, Mama. I've been in a trance. I haven't been sleeping. I've been washing my face off the port of Charleston. There's blood on the fog. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative. All over the United States, there are toddlers in the rock. I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket, and why blood agreements mean a lot and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history or take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm. Ricochet sewers near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti. In the kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part. No cops in part. My body brings down the Christmas. The new bullets pray over blankets made from the old bullets. Pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration. The waistbands before the next protest poster. And by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your deaths for last. You're witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only raining one thing. non-white cops, and prison guard shadows, reminding me of spoiled milk floating on an oil spill. A neighborhood making a lot of fuss over its demise. A new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder. The figment of village. A new noose to a new white preacher. All in an abstract painting of a president. Bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tanted screeches of military bolts and election Tuesday cars. A cold-blooded study in leg irons. Proof that some white people have actually found the nooses. The sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque peach plastic and bold action audiences. The Met Grave second is definitely my favorite law of science. Fondle news clippings and primitive Methodists, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even white spectrums. Artless bleeding in the challenge of watching civilians think. The terrible rituals they have around the corner, they let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads and their arrows myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans of war with their t-shirt poems and t-shirt guilt and me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus, I had no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. No, apparently too much of San Francisco was not there in the first place. And this dream requires more condemned Africans to put another way state violence rises down. Or still life is just getting warmed up. Or army life is looking for a new church and ignored all other suggestions. Or folktale writers have not made up their minds as to who is going to be their friends. I mean, this is the worst downtown yet. And I brought a cigarette everywhere. I've taken many a walk to the back of a bus that led on out the back of a storyteller's prison sentence, then on out the back of slave scars, but this is my comeback face. I left my watch on the public bathroom sink and took the toilet with me. Threw it at the first bus I saw, eating single mothers half alive. It flew through the bus line number, then on out the front of the White House. Hopefully you find comfort downtown, but if not, we brought you enough cigarette filters to make a decent winter coat. A special species of handshake, let's all know who's king. What's the lifespan of uniform cloth? This coffin needs to quit acting like those are birds singing. Rusty nails have no wings, have no voice other than that of a white world dying. Their book pages in the gas pump. Catchy, isn't it? The way 3 nooses is the rule, or the way potato sack masks go so well with radio codes, or the way condemned Africans fought their way back to the ocean only to find waves made of 1920s burnt up piano parts, European backdoor deals, and red flowers for widows who spent all day in the sun mumbling in San Francisco. Red flowers was the color of a doctor visit. There are book titles in the streets. Book titles like Hero, You Make a Better Zero, or Hey Fur Coat Lady, the President is Dead, or Pay Me Back in Children, or They Hung Up Their Bodies in Their Own Museums, and other book titles pulled from a drum solo. Run Here, Hero, Lie at the Hiding Place. All the bullets in 10 precincts, nowhere to go. There's no heaven, no any other good idea in the sky. Politics means that people did it and people do it. Understand that when in San Francisco and other places, that was never really there. I bet this ocean thinks it's an ocean, but it's not. It's just 6th and Mission Street. All know who's king. King of thin things. Like America, I'm proud to deserve to die. I'm going to eat my dinner extra slow tonight in this police state candy dispenser you all call it a neighborhood. No set of manners goes unpunished. Never mind the murderer's insomnia or the tea kettle preparing everyone for police sirens. These societies wander together like hopeful drops of a virus. Citizen testaments bent on offering me a nation of breadwinners to hold me back like it's a Brinks. I wrinkle the concrete sometimes like flesh. My Martin Luther King permanence turned away from a podium into the reeds like God is the dangerous twin. Black August to the mountaintop balcony on my bedroom floor. You know they steal you from the earth itself and suspend you and your broken neck from their fullest euphoria, from the loyalty oath of their great superstitions, loyalty oath of their agrarian reform. I return to my mother completely disrespected for peeling the heat off of purgatory. They kill poets like me. Walk me away from my poems, never to be heard from again. In this final industrial complex of bloodlines picked over, picked through, a sport and spiritual death, or your devil at least half made, police become a pretty word. I'm reading a lynch mob shoestrings like they were tea leaves, teaching you how to write about cities. It's the 25th century in the mirror, people. Tyranny against your chump change, and you're a chump to be mocked. Even with a gun in your car, a cubit of needlework spelled tomb for the proletariat, the relapse ministry, talented people curled up in a fetal position next to a diamond, dying, Just another service day in the theatrics of tea house fascism, in the bouquet of surveillance cameras, in the poverty of God, new blue eyes, corpses of water, a newly potted presidency, a one big shiny coin, if you ask, animated capitalism, and other non-literal voids killing is white freedom. The deification of hyphens, medicine bread and picture shows, great protesters in LA, guests of our ink, drop kicking roses in the graveyard, DC mink, like a stone torn in half, the pen advances, despite CIA guideposts, despite non-African past and futures, a metaphorical but not surreal day in the horn-ridden life, horn player improvising king, like a radio prize fight featuring Shango himself. A real hand sweeps the land of racism. May I return to the ground? May I make progress with the gun? On our mother Emmanuel, they put on music that evening, a swinging type body language for you to drink with fermented $5 bills for your body language. Some applause, my past stomach lining. Neither a good thing nor a bad thing, like being psychic on the way to a lethal injection. Man, it'll sit you down with Lady Day. Lady Day leading youth who surrendered their souls to Africa too soon. Polly thought, floating in the cup of water, she saved me. Accessing my stomach, accessing the love of the American lynched. Coat sleeves, wooden, and avalanching to the wrist. Our mother Emmanuel, avalanching to the sharp keys. Pain, the deal you make with pain. A piano makes sense for them. Laying hands on the world gradually, addressing the bend of necks in the streets of the North. Travelers sailing in pain, repeating pain in the North. 10 trigger fingers on that piano, if harmony would have me. Putting 100 fights on every direction offered her. Lady Day, leaning on trees again, recruiting the countryside itself, saying, lay your plan out on this lightning. Make your poems the corner pocket of men. I've greeted the blues itself. America may clean my dead body, but will never include me. There goes the poet. Killing without killing. Never mind this little painting of your language. May I be a meaningful lynching. A crow's passing. Good and dead by the afternoon. The end. So now, man, without any further delay, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you all the author of this and this experience right here. Let me put it. I mean, this thing, maybe it's just me, but poetry can be experienced, really like with the same kind of marvel of music. You can almost sit back and really watch a poet play, and just the moves they make with language, are mind-blowing, spirit enhancing, and the like. But never before has a book kind of reached through the mirror and pulled me in, and I found myself experiencing this book in a way that I've never experienced a book of poetry before, really, writing inside the hurricane. So what you have, this I can't, I can't say enough just how much of an honor it is just to share this a brief moment in the history of this book. You know what I'm saying? A brief and possibly tangential moment in the history of this book, man, because this is like the best that poetry can do, which is really take your spirit, take your soul for a ride. And I mean that with no embellishment. I really had a very special time reading this book, and so I'm going to get out the way of the indomitable Kiki Petrosino.
Well, thanks. Thanks so much, Tongo. Thank you to the Poetry Center. Thanks everyone for being here on a Thursday evening in December, starting off this last month of 2022. That was a wonderful, powerful reading of poetry and so much dimension and complexity to it. It was really, I was just listening to the sounds and the sonic complexity of it. So thanks so much, Tongo. Thanks so much for the intro. I'm going to start out with a quote. I'm going to read a short quote from Lucille Clifton's memoir, Generations, in which she kind of maps out in prose some of her own family history. And there's a passage in here that I feel like is relevant to the approach and some of the things that I was dealing with in writing White Blood, which I'll also read from for you tonight. In this passage, Clifton's father is talking about the matriarch of their family, whose name was Caroline, but she came from Africa. And this is what he says. They called her Caroline, Daddy would tell us. What her African name was, I never heard her say. I asked her one time to tell me, and she just shook her head. But it'll be forgot. I hollered at her. It'll be forgot. She just smiled at me and said, don't you worry, mister. Don't you worry. Prelude. You're on a train, and your ancestors are in the quiet car. The quiet car is locked with a password you can't decrypt. You're a professional password decryptor, but your ancestors are demolition experts. You're wearing black tactical gear, and your ancestors are wearing black tactical gear. You're dashing through each compartment, slamming doors open, while your ancestors lay small explosives. As the heat expands within the carriage, you escape through a picture window. You climb to the top of the train, and your ancestors rappel down the sides. You're rappelling down one side of the train when you glimpse your ancestors above you. They leap from carriage to carriage as if weightless, as if drifting, as if curling tongues of snow. You cling to the side of the train as each of your ancestors lifts away from you. They float into the cloud of themselves. In the rushing light, you perceive them as hundreds of slow snake doctors. Oh, you begin. What your results mean. Western Africa, 28%. The West African you is a hunter. Try. Carry this. The West African you has split and expanded, a mixture historic as a gene. The West African component of your lineage, the out of Africa event, the New World slave seen in this genetic print. You are likely a mixture, a cluster, a high number. Your DNA has roots that cluster and spread and trade and carry. the West African U spanning more than more regions of time in people. O. Between this cluster and this cluster, an African O. O Niger and Chad. O fingerprint. African, you span most of Africa, African America, African diaspora, and the southern African forests out of Africa, east, south, and then southeast. Within Africa, throughout Africa, the historic African world. Well, so, well, so. A bunch of poems in this book, and therefore the motivation behind the book, are about how difficult it is to imagine or to somehow reclaim or follow or trace the experiences and the lives of those ancestors who endured the era of enslavement, even when you know that you're one of the descendants of those ancestors. It's just hard with our own modern ears and eyes and our own sensibilities to think about what it would be like to be in that time. And so there are a few, or in those bodies or in those spaces. And so there are a few poems in here that think about that question or that conundrum, specifically with regard to Thomas Jefferson's Monticello, which was his home in Central Virginia, not too far away from the University of Virginia. Instructions for time travel. You must go through Mr. Jefferson, along his row of chinaberry trees, behind the ruined smokehouse, in unmarked tracts, under field stones, with no carvings, no monuments, with a few leaves shadowing the mulch, near scattered weeds, in sunken lines, while the sun walks in the day, at the end of the day, in an oval of brushed earth, just as the soft path finishes, under branches where the dead are always saying what they always say, right about me. Essay in architecture. The human face, its pine doors painted like mahogany, human face with horses under each veranda, perfect parquet tetragons of the human face still legible in Old French, sealed closet of the human face lit by oculus, design face, tinker face, factory face, twine and bare wood comprising a pulley system for the human face, woodworked face with sunbeams settling in. Revolving buffet supporting the human face, entire pewter plate collection in the face, human face as soup tureen as paint chip as spit jack, smoke rings textured like the human face cured, human face pickled, human face brushed with olive oil, anchovies, and parmesan, green floor of the dome room just above the human face, floating view of the face, its quarter farms, rough cabins dotting a sloped face partly visible, human face built to resemble a great clock, great pendulum, drawing faces in the air. Terrorum. Every night, I go back to Mr. Jefferson's place, searching still his kitchens behind staircases in a patch of shade somewhere, beside his joinery and within his small ice house, till I get down that pit lined with straw where Mr. Jefferson once stacked frozen slabs of river water until summer. Then visitors would come to him to ask about a peculiar green star or help him open up his maps. They'd kneel together on the floor among his books, lavish hunks of ice melting like the preserved tears of some antique mammal who must have wept to leave Albemarle, just as I wept when I landed in Milan for the first time, Stone City, where Mr. Jefferson began to learn the science of ice houses, how you dig into the dark flank of the land, how you seal the cavity. Leave open just one small hatch through which I might lift through gratings Mr. Jefferson's cold-dressed victuals, his expensive butter and salads, the sealed jars sweating clear gems of condensation, white blood appearing from warm air, as if air could break and slough, revealing the curved arc of our shared Milan. There I wore silver rings on each thumb. I studied and spoke in fine houses of ice. I knew a kind of crying which sealed me to such realms for good. Old magic weep, old throb in throat. How much of my fondness for any place is water stilled and bound to darkness. The shop at Monticello. I'm a black body in this commonwealth, which turned black bodies into money. Now I have money to spend on little trinkets to remind me of this fact. I'm a money machine, and my body constitutes the commonwealth. I spend and spend in order to support this. I support this mountain with my black money, strange mountain in late bloom, strange mansion built on mountains of wealth. I spend so much I'm late for the tour, where I'm a blooming black dollar sign. I look good in the dome room prowling its high-gloss floor. It's common to desire such flooring for my own home, but owning a home is still strange. My blackness makes strange tools for a living, rakes the strangeness like dirt. I like to rake my hands over merchandise, Bayberry votives, English hyssop in crisp sachets. I like this engraved pewter bookmark so much suddenly I line up for it, clenching my upright fist. I pay cash to prove myself no shoplifter. Still, I abscond with my black feelings, crisp toast points dunked in fig jam. On one hand, I must think very highly of myself to come here. Then again, that sounds like something I would say. I'll move now to a section of the book that has to do with my own family, my own ancestors who lived and were part of the enslaved and free communities of Central Virginia in a little county, rural county called Louisa, which is right next door to Albemarle County. So right next door to where Jefferson was living, writing, where he was, where he himself was trafficking and holding people of African descent. And then right in the next county, right next door, my ancestors were also living through the era of enslavement. And so I'm still spending a lot of time trying to find out as much as I can about their lives. And this is where I was with that process when I was writing this book. In Louisa, you wake up because you hear someone singing, "Little lamb, little lamb," as if the singer were calling from across a great distance. You know, as you've always known, that you're the little lamb in this song, just as you know that no matter how far you may wander from the loop of sand where you were born, the singer of this particular song will always sing "Little Lamb," meaning you quite distinctly. As you slowly climb from the covers, you try to tell the song to stop that noise, please. But what comes out is "play it again," which you hadn't meant to say at all. Soon the song starts up once more, spinning the long journey of itself. It speaks of coiling into thickets of sharp weeds, of slanting across hills. The song even describes you, and some time before remembrance, you wore a suit of woven water and learned to speak in rippling syllables, you or someone like you. Message from the Free Smiths of Louisa County. You want to know who owned us and where, but when you type, your searches return no results. Bondage was grown folks' business, then old folks. We saw no reason to hum old master's name to our grandchildren or point out his overgrown gates, but you want to know who owned us and where we got free. You keep typing our names into oblongs of digital white. You plant a Unicode tree and climb up into grown folks' business. You know old folks don't want you rummaging here, so you pile sweet jam in your prettiest dish. You light candles and pray, tell me who owned you and where I might find your graves. Little child, we're at rest in the acres we purchased. Those days of bondage were old folks' business. The grown folks buried us deep. Only a few of our names survive. We left you this, sudden glints in the grass. The rest is grown folks' business, we say. Yet you keep asking who owned us. The origins of Butler Smith. B is for bright. A boy. No birthmarks, but his hair inclined to straightness, and his nose more like a white man's. B also for the bluets you dreamed, crowding the drive leading up to the old farm you've crossed 2 states to see. What'll you do if you find no parcel in the name of B, at the courthouse, in the relic room, at the indicated plat? So sorry you don't already know the yard where chickens pecked and patted under the eye of Granddaddy B. So sorry you missed him on his way. He must be burning high above your head, a comet, or worse, the story of a comet somebody told you. Wrong comet, wrong county, wrong dates spiraled into the roll book, a roll of microfilm for every year you can't confirm. How to confirm a certain smokehouse not marked on any grid? Lucky bee, spangled bee, this is not where you begin. Message from the Free Smiths of Louisa County. You ask why we didn't register as required, why we failed to appear before the provost marshal, why we avoided the courthouse, the census, the bank. You ask where we sheltered while battles seethed, well, where our mothers gave birth, in which hidden houses, and why we didn't register as required. While so many perished in other counties or raged with Nat in Southampton, how did we manage? We avoided the courthouse, the census, the bank. Whatever we had, we held. Whatever we knew, we told no one who counted. We kept back our names. We didn't register as required. When you search for us now, you find silence. You may trace us back to a moment no further. We avoided the courthouse, the census, the bank, with its clock tracking everyone's time but our own. We chose inward passages. We kept deep counsel. We didn't register as required, which disappoints you. Why do you trust the courthouse, the census, the bank? Okay, I'll just read 2 more poems from this book. This is a poem that's based on a letter that I found in the Freedmen's Bureau records, which are some records that were kept for a lot of counties in the South by during the time of Reconstruction. So after the Civil War, there was a lot of tension and conflicts between the newly freed Black community and the white folks who were struggling effectively to live in a new reality where people that they had enslaved, they now had to recognize as fellow citizens. This poem is called Mrs. A.T. Goodwin's Letter to the Provost Marshal, 1866, Louisa County. You ask why I raised my hand to that boy, why I gave him some raps over the head. You ask why I took my small riding whip to his shoulders, his head. Why, you ask, when he would not cut logs at the woodpile. You ask why I took him by the hand and gave him some raps, when not one stick did he cut from 12 to 4. I told his mother, my milker washed her. I told her in plain words he must do better. I told her all this without any improvement. She was insolent, which is why my son struck her. He only struck her when she ran from her cabin to pluck up the boy while I was giving him some raps over the head and shoulders with just my small riding whip. Understand, sir, this boy had not cut more than 2 scant handfuls of wood for my cook stove, but all the family were engaged to me. His mother, the boy, to bring my horses to water to cut wood. Only yesterday he said, I shall not cut a stick of wood. I shall not touch it. So these are the Negroes we have raised, never abused a single one, always had the kindest feelings, the kindest so long as their conduct were tolerable, so long as I did not have to stand by my woodpile, smelling the woodpile, the smell of the sap intolerable from 12 to 4, the heave and snap of the clear sap inside the logs, never holding still, so that I had rather stand in the house, my hands sifting flour across a board, so that in truth I had much rather be still, holding nothing but my riding whip, dark and folded up small. What your results mean. North and East Africa, 5%. For millennia, the Mediterranean Sea was as one, despite the constant movement of people across people. This component traveled across logical connection, remnants all numb. North of the world, the earliest people saw Africa evident in the eye. Place of first migration, mitochondrial flux, the savanna frequency. This component of you includes a great rift, influx of lists. Mediterranean most traveled, Mediterranean biological, old and in pain. The sea saw the south sea. South, oldest home, wide open, high. South of the great valley and west of Lucy, here, the pen. Birthplace as well as departure point. Ocean. This is where historically we from. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kiki, for your amazing reading. The way you play with language and just the concepts of rememory are just absolutely astounding. I want to invite the poets to join in conversations, sing one another's praises, and audience members, please direct any questions that you may have for the writers to the Q&A section in the Zoom room. I'll let y'all take it away.
Right on. I kind of want to get out the way of people's questions if they have it. But I have some questions if they're not available right now. While people are getting their thing together, I was just kind of curious how you experience history, and if almost that sense evolved through the writing of the book, or has evolved along the way in your journey with poetry in general. But just how does your mind join with these realities?
I don't know if it's as a result of writing this book of poetry or as a result of getting older, but more and more I find myself saying things like time is nonlinear. and feeling and saying it with a great deal of conviction and passion about this like truth that I'm uttering, even though I hardly understand it. But the way that I experience history is through intersection and collision and through a sense of a haunting, I think. I don't think that the things that happened in the past were discrete events that can be fully forgotten about. I think that the memory remains in the landscape, in nature. It remains in the built architecture. There's memory that remains in the body, in the bodies of the descendants of people who experience certain things. That's why I say that time isn't linear. And in places like Virginia, and I would think that San Francisco would be like this too. There are certain places you can go where you can feel the past quite palpably. When I'm at Monticello as a tourist and just kind of walking around that environment, I can feel the currents of the past and the memory of all the different lives of the people who lived in that space and interacted in that space. I can feel all those currents crossing around energetically. And I think that that's, for me, the most important place to be as a poet is where those energies are coalescing, where there's like the presence of memory. I went to undergrad at the University of Virginia, which some of y'all may know was founded by Thomas Jefferson. So some of the architecture you see at Monticello where he lived, he also wanted to bring to the campus of the University of Virginia. And when I walk around the grounds, which is what we call the campus, I also feel the energies and the memories of all of the people, not only students who came to study at UVA for 2 centuries, but also the many, 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 many Black people who worked and physically built the university. And I also encounter my own former self, my own student self from like the late 90s, early 2000s. I regularly encounter a ghost Kiki who had a certain experience of UVA at that time. So that's why I say that I feel like time isn't linear. It exists even in the present, and there are certain places in the world where we can experience that when we walk around, we walk through those spaces. I don't know if you feel that way too about the places where you walk around.
No, I feel it all the time. Yeah, but what you I must have 2 kind of like follow up questions. I think the priority would be to ask you how does that then, like, what urges does that give you as far as how you deal with the present moment or with present praxis? Are you inspired to deal with with your immediate task in certain ways, given that you have this sensitivity and awareness?
Yeah, I think that for me, I try to bring a lot of attention and a carefulness to writing about the past. It's, I think, easy to encounter the absence of something and think that it's a blank space. Like if you don't have the full history of someone's life, it just seems like it's a blank space that you could imagine anything into. And as writers, one of our tools is to imagine ourselves into lives we didn't live, and to kind of like bring attention to voices that are lost, maybe try to reimagine a voice that's lost to history. For me, because I know that I feel that those voices existed and that past was there, I don't want to use my poetic tools to overwrite that space. So I find myself using things like persona, which is when the poet enters into an imagined subjectivity of another person, I find myself being very sparing when I use persona, because I feel like I don't want to step into the subject position of a person who had a voice, but their voice has not been preserved in the historical record. I kind of want to use my tools of poetry, and certainly in White Blood, my book, I wanted to use the tools of poetry to hold the space open and keep the space there for those voices and for those memories, even though we can't see them or hear them in the conventional way, rather than try to imagine something over top of that, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And since what you saying reminds me of did you see the I forget what it was called, but that's the Toni Morrison documentary where she described the kind of the making of Beloved, how she started with just the story of a woman who escaped, who had killed a child, and that's all she had, and didn't know how she was going to kind of open that portal. And then one morning or afternoon, she's looking out a window and sees this bench and saw saw Beloved, saw the woman on the bench, who was a ghost, right? And that's when it clicked. And there she is, and it started from there. I wonder, back to kind of your approach to kind of to co-creating subjectivity with a protagonist. How did you get to that balance? And once there, do you see other ways you can go in a kind of embodying a mind with your mind?
Yeah, for me, the key to it was kind of imagining or understanding the page itself as a multi-dimensional space. Like when I was a young poet, I kind of thought of the page as a picture plane. It's two-dimensional. I put marks on it. Somebody comes along and reads those marks. And so, whatever I put on the page, like, that's it. Like, that's the end of what the page is. It's just a surface for me to perform on. But in fact, I kind of like to think about the page as a surface that also has depth. So in writing a poem that utilizes what we might call white space, which is really just unwritten on paper, it's whatever we have, like a space within a gap within the poem. It looks like it's white space because the paper is white and it's not written on. But in fact, that space is actually a space of submergence. It's actually a place where there is something, but it's below the surface of what can be spoken in the poem at that moment, right? And I kind of like developed that idea by thinking about and reading around Melville and Moby Dick, and how when you read that, okay, it's a novel, it's an adventure story, but the whale, is under the surface for most of the time. And the whale breaks the surface, it's for a reason, but there's no point at which the whale is gone entirely. The whale is always in the back of the mind, under the surface. The sort of the symbolic like heft of that whale is in its ability to enter and exit the realm of speakability. The horror of the whale for Ishmael and for like Ahab is kind of unspeakable. It's hard to describe what is so scary about the whale because it seems so primal. It's so like part of like our almost biological fear mechanism, So there's a dimensionality to that experience that surpasses speech. So in thinking about what poetry is, what a poem is, we have to think about what a page is. A page is not just a flat plane for us to make marks on. It's actually it can be a portal, but it can be like all of these other things that allow for ideas, concepts, language, stories, voices to exist at different levels of our like apprehension. And as the poet, you can draw from within the page, you can draw out ideas and histories, but you can also submerge those. And that's part of the power and the control that you can have as you develop your skills and your abilities as a poet, you know?
Man, I hope everybody's taking notes. You know? I wanted to get into some questions that have entered. One to you saying I said I love the intersection of history and personal identity. How do you view the archive in your work, and what are the challenges of the past that you are still working through in your poetry?
Yeah. Well, the archive an archive became really important in researching this work. You know, I am not a trained historian at all. I was an English major. I feel like my research skills have to do with just like your basic humanities scholar research skills. So it's not like I came in with a specialized knowledge of how to use an archive. But as I interacted with materials that were in special collections rooms, as I interacted with librarians and archivists and realized how passionate those professionals are about preserving what is in archives and about really utilizing and activating archives, I started to feel more empowered to go into those spaces. So at this point, I see the act of going into an archive as a Black woman as part of my growing literacy, that now I feel empowered to go and select materials that I want to study and that I want to look at. I also feel like my own life experience creates a kind of conceptual archive. And I've learned to value my own history, my own memory, the stories of my own family as belonging to the overall archive of Black history. I once saw somebody tweet, you know, the story of how your grandparents met is also part of Black history, you know? And I love the invitation of that we're all part of Black history and that we can actually write down and preserve a story that is from our own family, even if our family members weren't some famous people or something, but that there's this huge archive that is Blackness that we can all like be a part of and that we can also draw from, you know? As far as like challenges in my work, I feel like each book of poetry that I write is really different. Each project feels really different. But in my last couple of books, I've been thinking a whole bunch about Thomas Jefferson and about the relationship of Jefferson's legacy to my own life path as a person that is a professor at the University of Virginia. And he seems to surface a lot. He might be the white whale for me. And so I don't know if he's like a challenge, but I kind of feel that I'm continuing to reckon with his complex legacy. And he's a source of fascination and curiosity for me, but he's also a source of bafflement and frustration. So I feel like I might be pursuing him, hopefully with better results than Ahab had in future writing.
It looks like this next question is for you, Tongo. Tiffany Caesar asks, can you expand on police become a pretty word and the significance of it as it relates to the ongoing social justice issues we are facing? And also, can you discuss the multi-layered use of death in your work as it relates to social justice, identity, and spiritual transformation?
I can try. I can try. I can take a stab at it. You know, in a way, I think that like my my poetry is at times it is kind of stuck near the gallows. You know, both from experience, the experience of my personal territory, and just being in tune with the expanse of recent epochs here. And so, similar to what Kiki was saying about basically every moment being, or I guess this is my rough way of putting it, every moment being a convergence of, past, present, and the various forces that produce their realities. I'm really just, almost in a way, a kind of a poet's revenge to use the very forces sent to destroy me to find insight. And I think, like Bob Kaufman is a good kind of avatar of that. Check out, like, just somebody who takes the tidal wave and throws it back. Who returns the tidal wave served back to you. As far as like, I mean, and it's an ongoing. For me, it's an ongoing investigation. It's almost something. You think about the spiritual, kind of potentials and connotations and implications, of poetry. I found for myself it's healthier to not try to codify too severely what's going on, to actually is some analysis is healthier to just to brush up against, to use a different kind of, not to try to grab or control or hold or retain, but rather just kind of experience, because you don't want this to just become your personal adventure. But as far as the police become a pretty word, it's almost it's a dual kind of. It's almost like two different personalities are asserting themselves at the same time. The first personality is one, strung up on a tree somewhere, and saying, like, there's like, not only is this police thing nothing new as far as their function in this society, but it's like, oh, look at that, that's so cute. They got little uniforms on now instead of, you know what I'm saying? Instead of just instead of their usual robes or whatever, they're nice and they're almost artistic. The second kind of almost the second voice in that duet of a line is more of a kind of a confrontational character who would also is kind of is actually it's almost the same riff, but really is like kind of egging us all on, like, what this, like, that's nothing, you know what I mean? That's nothing to strike. That's nothing to strike fear in your heart. And, this kind of, I think, as far as, like a revolutionary's task, what you can do with the pen and not the sword, or you can do with a pen and a sword, but be careful with your swords. is really just to show the people how mortal and finite and invincible that the system is, and the people that populate it, and so that's kind of those two kind of implications are what make up that line.
Thank you so much, Tongo. I think you did a good job answering it. You did it.
Right on. Right on.
And I think this question can go for both of you, since you're both educators and also poets. And it's another multi-part one. It goes, what are you learning from your own pedagogy? Are there questions or processes in your work that emerge from the questions you pose to your students? I'm curious about the relationship between pedagogy and poetics, and the degree to which your teaching supports your writing. And they thank y'all for being here.
Well, I have to say hi to Makesha, my student that asked this question. It's been an honor to teach Makesha in at least one seminar and in a workshop coming up next semester. So thanks, Makesha, for the question, and thanks for being here. I think Makesha knows, and I think that my students know, that I will design a course around questions that I am asking myself as a poet. So I designed a seminar about a year ago about Thomas Jefferson, and specifically called it Thomas Jefferson for Poets, and kind of wanted to ask questions about Jefferson's archive, but also think about what does it mean to work and write and make art at a university with this particular history and connection to a founding father. I think that in a larger sense, though, I always want to keep in mind with my teaching and with my writing what literacy is, and like my constantly evolving definition of what it means to be a literate person and a literate artist. I used to think literacy just meant learning how to read and write, but in fact, literacy is this very complex process and relationship, an ability to like navigate the world and understand signs, signifiers, symbols. And so I want to be able to empower my students and empower myself to understand that texts are open and not closed, that a text can be read, it can be questioned, it can be, we can learn things from it, we can ask questions of it, we can critique it, and that we have the power and the ability and the authorization to do that. And that when we do that, that sharpens our literacy for the next text that we're going to be exploring. I always want to keep my course design and my pedagogy transparent as much as I can for students. So I want to give them all the books and say, this is why I chose these books, but then also invite them to read and to have a relationship with the texts on their own. In my own development as a poet, there are certain pieces of literature that I was able to encounter at crucial times in my own literacy formation that have continued to be important to me and that I always have on my desk. And when I teach, I don't necessarily want the students to have those exact same books on their desk, but what I really want to know is what is on their desk. What are those texts that they keep reaching for, that they feel like are never closed and that are never finished, and that they can always find something new from. So you begin designing a class for me from a question that I'm asking anyway in my own art making. And I want to be able to ask students that question and listen to what they have to say. And I learn just as much from the students' responses to material and to certain kinds of questions. I learn more actually from listening to what the students say than I would by just contemplating those same questions myself, you know? So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again in January in the classroom.
Man, Kiki's thoughts are so hard to not, like, I forgot what I forget my own autonomy. And I'm listening. I just want to turn in my mind and borrow yours, you know. But I which kind of is almost lately been my kind of general kind of personality of just trying to, you know, almost like feel like a race against time, pouring through various pedagogies that are pointed towards liberation, because I just feel such a kind of like a desperation right now. And as groovy as, you know, all of these moments can be, you know, when you look at what happened to the kid in Gulfport, Mississippi, 2 days ago, I think it was a young 15-year-old was shot like in the back of his head with no, you know, it had no weapon, by police. I forget the brother's name. This innocent cat was just put to death somewhere, some couple of days ago. I'm blanking on that too. It's just, you know, the cultural work is everything. But I think we need to tinker with the equations. So because you know, the kind of like it's almost like the imperialist grip on history is still stronger than ours, and if that and that can't just be part of the, you know, the stage play, and hopefully there is some kind of you know, there is some kind of conclusion to this, but you know, it's I just almost I'm finding it difficult now to rely on well, I'm finding it difficult to not jump the gun in praxis, right? So, you know, theory, practice, and it's hard to stay out the streets for me right now because I just feel like, you know, I feel like we're really behind as people who want to be human beings and know that we can only be human beings when everybody and when all are human beings. And those of us who come to terms with that fact and, you know, give our you know, give our personhood to that. You know, I'm really I'm almost I'm in a little bit of a panic right now. But the groovy news, as far as how that relates to poetics, I think it is that it's that searching mind, or that mind that is constantly searching for ways to not transmute, but just to, you know, just to take a fact and turn it into something something that someone else's mind can use and learn from. That kind of that social position is kind of it being the digestive part of this kind of human journey is almost the best kind of we're lucky that that's almost the best the best part to play in that, as a poet, you know, to just to think about your craft is really almost an opportunity to teach yourself how the world works, or even how the universe works, in a way that is, you know, in a way that can be foundational, or at the very least accessible to other minds. It really is, and I think was it June Jordan? I think it was June Jordan who said like a poet has to be a teacher. Or maybe it was Audre Lorde. I'm blanking now. I'm blanking on everything right now. I have no access to what I know, but it's yeah. I guess there's nowhere to land, but it's hard to say. My pedagogy right now is in a kind of a frenetic search, but along the way, a lot of good poems get written as a result, and hopefully, whether the answer is just to calm down, better praxis will also hopefully we'll be able to contribute to that, to a liberatory praxis that we can, really, humanity can finally turn a corner and stop living like idiots. You know what I mean?
And I guess with that, I want to do a quick last call for our audience if there are any more questions for these two amazing, brilliant poets and educators. I'm gonna give y'all some time to type out, but I just want to say, Kiki and Tongo, just reading y'all's work, especially I know Tongo, just existing in y'all's spaces, just thank you so much for what you do with your poetry and what you do for students. Y'all are absolutely brilliant. And I feel like I've grown so much just watching y'all converse and reading your work.
Oh, right
And
on.
if there are no more questions, we're going to call it.
Whoops, there is one more.
Oh, there's one more. What are y'all working on now? That's a great question.
Well, well, right now I'm working on a new book of poems. In August, I came out with a memoir. And so I'm trying to, that was in something like prose. So now I'm kind of going back into my original calling, my original vocation, and trying to write a collection of poems that I hope will expand and help maybe bring to plenitude, let's say, my thoughts that I have had, my investigations that I've been having about history and about Virginia, and a little bit about Jefferson. So that's what I'll say right now, but it is going to be poems, and it'll be once again thinking about the places where I find myself and the connections to memory.
Man, I mean, I'm supposed to be writing a book right now, but I'm in that weird kind of a kind of like a pattern, a helpful pattern I've noticed in this poetry thing, like whether it's getting to the next line in a poem or getting to the next line in the way you say a poem, and also getting to the next book is to kind of disappear, to dissolve, dissolve the kind of the mode that you're in. If it begins to calcify, if your mind starts to calcify, let it all go and just allow yourself to reappear somewhere else as something else, kind of like along the lines of what Kiki was saying. There's just so much under the surface. You can kind of like, you can't just let it go and just see what picks you up, or see what then comes to the surface. And that's kind of where I am, I feel like, writing wise right now, because my last book really felt, it was almost like last words, man. So I'm just almost, like all kind of like literally, figuratively, metaphorically, like I've disappeared now, and now I'm seeing, I just have to see how I'm reincarnated. But so I'm just tinkering. But I have been solidly working on just cultural efforts around freeing Mumia. He has this a big court hearing coming up on December 16th. Basically, they now have even a witness. They have a witness. They actually have now evidence of a witness demanding the money they were supposed to be paid from the DA to give this false testimony. And so once again, it's going before this is going before a judge asking for a new trial for Mumia. So there's an effort to just get a blitz of writing out about Mumia to kind of lift his name back up. And we're also we're doing a letter writing kind of actually December 5th is a kind of letter writing day, and you can come to chapter 510 in Oakland at 6 p.m. on December 5th, and you can write letters with us, or you can write letters now and go there and drop them off. Actually, I think on the 4th too at 1 p.m. I think I forget the name of the branch, but it's in Oakland. The branch is on 81st Avenue. There's some letter writing going on there too, and then we're having a rally on the hearing day on December 16th. We're having a rally at Oscar Grant Plaza in Oakland, also known as Frank Ogawa Plaza. So just that kind of effort is what I've been working on, and also working on my cousin was murdered by white supremacists in St. Paul, Minnesota, a year and 1 day ago. And actually, I'm flying out there tomorrow to kick some organizing efforts back up. This cast trial is starting, but I'm not. Justice is not. Let me put it like this: like when in a situation like this, and with a murder like this, like there is no justice is impossible. Someone, I think there's a misunderstanding that when somebody is taken from you like that it's a one time, or it's a whole that stays still. When really it is a daily expanding whole. And you actually experience this murder every day. It's like they're taken from you every day. So they haven't invented the kind of justice that would that would do anything appropriate to that reality. But what we can work on is building a unity, the unity required to make sure that these aggressions, like you seen in Buffalo, like you saw on January 6th, get put in check. So those kind of organizing efforts is also what I've been where my mind has been lately.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we have 2 more questions. The first is, poetry is so intrinsically connected to processing things we struggle to put words to. And as someone beginning my teaching career, soon I am constantly thinking about how to open children's minds at a young age and strengthen their autonomy. Do you have any advice on how to communicate more intricate and difficult truths to young kids?
That's a really great question. Feel like I'm fortunate because both of my parents were teachers, and they were teachers in Baltimore City Public Schools. And a generation before that, my grandmother taught in a one-room schoolhouse. So for me, these questions, teaching and communicating the realities of life to young people. That's something that I was be able to benefit from in my own upbringing. My parents were always like really clear, and they were really honest in explaining what was going on in the world. Whether it be something that happened in politics or a question that I had about history, historical events, they would use clear language in explaining it, and they didn't wave off my questions. I feel like that's important when a young person comes up to you with a question, that you take the time to answer it, and to listen to see if the student has more questions. Pointing the student to books is something that was also really formative for me, and to say to them, there are resources that I can point you to, and then when you have questions, I can teach you how to find books, so that they will develop their own process and their own methods of asking questions, seeking information, being able to find information on their own, and then being able to process that information through their own literacy as it forms. So I think anything that encourages students to ask questions and encourages them to investigate, and learn to read in a supportive atmosphere, I think will be good.
Cass were kind of heavy-handed with me as a kid, but what I benefited from was I was always given the real context of my education, right? What this country is made of, its true origin. The people I belong to is all, there was never a period without that. I don't remember ever, it wasn't like Santa Claus and Peter Pan, and then eventually when I got old enough, the transatlantic slave trade, like, it's day one, day one. This is the reality of where we are and what we have to do, and therefore, I was kind of taught that, you don't learn on behalf of yourself. You're learning on behalf of your people, and you're preparing yourself for power, right? Preparing yourself to so it's like, if this is all just, there's an idea that, we're just sitting in a world full of people's ideas. Well, why, we have to prepare the world for your ideas, or prepare yourself to really just to determine your reality and determine it collectively. So it was just kind of like context for education. Gave it a living quality, and gave it a kind of it countered the compartmentalization that regular, kind of capitalist modes of raising a child or raising a society really give you. And also just making sure that, the text, that the text is something that you use, is something that they are in, I wasn't really taught like, it was, how they say, Black History Month is all year. It really was with us, like, so, I didn't, so I didn't look at myself as peripheral, right? Or our cosmology is central. Our journey is central in all the tools, and I learned all the tools to reading and writing and researching all that through an assertion of of our right to be protagonists in the historical process. So, minding what you present. I mean, it almost is it's an easy trick. You don't even have to, you don't have to master the Farrian model of education. you don't have to get it all the way down just to, a people's experience will do the work for you, and teaching to the realities of social contradiction will be charismatic, will make you a charismatic kind of representative of education.
And our final question is, how do we encourage the reading and development of poetry in middle school and high school when there's so much emphasis on technology, because that's where the money is made?
What I find in interacting with young people is that they want to create, they want to make something, they want to write. And so the challenge is not necessarily how do you encourage the student to start an artistic practice, but more like, how do we prevent, the curriculum or prevent outside forces from stopping the student, right? From getting in the student's way of continuing to create. I think that being able to have artistic creation happening within the school building, the arts and humanities are so important to keep in public schools. Libraries, having a library with a friendly and resourceful librarian, having the library space be a space that young people actually want to go to and spend time in, letting them have a notebook and a pen that they like to write with so that they can write poems, they can write songs, they can write stories, letting them meet poets and artists is going to be inspiring for students. Taking them to go and see people like Tongo reading, speaking, holding forth with their ideas, so that they can see real artists in the world, taking them into art galleries, taking them to different kinds of events and happenings, which I know there are many, many of in the San Francisco area, and just letting them have an experience of seeing and witnessing poetic expression in the world. I think that would be a way to encourage students to keep doing things that they already kind of naturally want to do, which is to create and to make things.
I wouldn't add anything to that. That's right. To that I say amen. That's crucial.
And I'm putting amen in too. I want to thank y'all so much for being here. Kiki, again, congratulations on your Poetry Center Book Award. And thank you all for coming to this great event. I hope you have a fantastic evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Much love, y'all.
We're all done, right? Bailey, we stopped broadcasting.